Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first lesson on the fundamentals of data analysis and significance testing. I'm excited to explore this foundational topic with you today. Over the next few minutes, we'll be examining what data analysis really means, why it matters across different research traditions, and most importantly, how to select the right analytical approach for your specific research needs. This lesson will provide the conceptual foundation for everything we'll explore in this module. Let's begin with our learning objectives. By the end of today's session, you'll be able to identify the purpose and process of data analysis across various research traditions. This means understanding not just the how, but the why of analysis. You'll also be able to distinguish between descriptive and inferential approaches to analysis, a critical distinction that will guide your methodological choices. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you'll be able to analyze the relationship between research questions, design, and analytical approach. This alignment is absolutely crucial for rigorous research. These aren't just academic concepts, they're practical skills you'll use every time you engage with data. Whether you're working with numbers, text, images, or any other form of evidence, these objectives will guide your approach to transforming raw information into meaningful insights that can advance knowledge in your field. Here's our roadmap for today's journey. We'll spend about 7 minutes understanding the purpose of data analysis, why we do it, and what it accomplishes. Then another 7 minutes exploring how analysis works across different research traditions. We'll dedicate 6 minutes to walking through the analysis process itself, followed by 4 minutes on selecting appropriate analytical approaches. Finally, we'll have a brief moment for self-reflection to connect these concepts to your own work. So, let's dive into our first major topic. Why do we analyze data? At its core, data analysis is about making meaning from evidence. Think about this for a moment. We're constantly surrounded by data. Every observation, every measurement, every response to a survey question represents a piece of potential information. But raw data by itself tells us very little. It's like having all the ingredients for a complex recipe spread across your kitchen counter. Until you combine them thoughtfully, following appropriate procedures, you don't have a meal. You just have ingredients. Data analysis is the process that transforms these raw ingredients into something meaningful and useful. It's the bridge between observation and insight, between information and understanding. When we analyze data, we're creating actionable knowledge, insights that can inform decisions, shape policies, advance theories, or solve problems. The core question we're addressing is, how do we move from numbers and words to knowledge? This isn't a trivial question. It requires us to think carefully about our assumptions, our methods, and our interpretations. Every analytical choice we make, from how we clean our data to how we present our findings, shapes the story our data tells. That's why understanding the fundamentals is so critical. Without a solid foundation in analytical thinking, we risk misinterpreting our data, drawing incorrect conclusions, or missing important insights altogether. The good news is that with proper understanding and practice, data analysis becomes a powerful tool for discovery and understanding. Data analysis accomplishes 6 key purposes, and understanding these will help you choose the right approach for your research. First, And most obviously, analysis answers research questions. This is the direct response to what we set out to investigate. If we ask, what percentage of students complete their degrees within 4 years? Analysis provides that answer. Second, analysis provides descriptive understanding. This is about characterizing what is happening in our data. What are the patterns? What's typical? What's unusual? Descriptive analysis might tell us the average income in a community, the most common themes in interview responses, or the distribution of species in an ecosystem. Third, analysis identifies relationships. This goes beyond description to explore connections. Do variables move together? Are certain themes associated with specific contexts? For instance, we might discover that study time correlates with exam scores, or that certain coping strategies appear more frequently in specific populations. Fourth, analysis can assess causation, though this requires very careful design and interpretation. Can we determine what causes what? This is perhaps the most challenging purpose, requiring either experimental control or sophisticated analytical techniques to rule out alternative explanations. When a randomized controlled trial shows a medication reduces symptoms, that's causal assessment in action. Fifth, analysis supports theory development. By identifying patterns across multiple studies or cases, we can develop explanations for phenomena. Grounded theory methodology, for example, builds theoretical understanding directly from systematic analysis of qualitative data. Finally, analysis enables prediction. Based on patterns in existing data, what might happen next? Predictive analytics in healthcare might forecast patient readmission risk, while climate models predict future temperature changes. Each purpose requires different analytical tools and approaches. Descriptive understanding might use measures of central tendency and spread, or thematic categorization. Relationship identification employs correlation, regression, or pattern analysis. Causal assessment requires experimental designs or careful quasi-experimental approaches. Theory development often combines multiple analytical strategies iteratively. The key is matching your analytical approach to your purpose. Let's ground these purposes in real-world applications across different fields. In healthcare, when researchers analyze clinical trial data, they're often pursuing multiple purposes simultaneously. They describe participant characteristics, identify which patients respond best to treatment, assess whether the treatment causes improvement, and develop models to predict treatment success. A single cancer drug trial might produce descriptive statistics about patient demographics, correlational analyses of biomarkers and response rates, causal conclusions about efficacy, and predictive models for personalized medicine. In education, analyzing student performance data helps identify learning patterns and improve teaching methods. For example, learning analytics might reveal that students who engage with online materials in shorter, frequent sessions outperform those who cram. This finding combines descriptive analysis of study patterns, relationship identification between study habits and performance, and potentially predictive modeling for early intervention. Business analytics transforms customer behavior data into market segmentation strategies. Amazon's recommendation engine, for instance, uses purchase history analysis to identify patterns, predict preferences, and ultimately drive sales. This involves describing customer segments, identifying purchasing relationships, and building sophisticated predictive models. In social sciences, researchers might analyze interview transcripts to identify cultural themes. A study on workplace satisfaction might uncover themes of autonomy, recognition, and work-life balance through systematic, qualitative analysis. This descriptive and interpretive work can then inform theory about motivation and organizational behavior. Environmental scientists analyze climate measurements to identify trends and make predictions. They describe current conditions, identify relationships between variables like CO2 and temperature, assess causal mechanisms through modeling, and predict future scenarios. What's crucial to understand is that these aren't isolated examples. Every field uses data analysis to transform raw information into actionable insights. The specific techniques vary, but the fundamental purposes remain consistent. Whether you're analyzing genome sequences, historical texts, or market trends, you're engaging in the same basic process of making meaning from evidence. Now let's explore how analysis works across different research traditions. There are three major approaches, each with its own strengths and philosophical foundations. Quantitative analysis works with numbers and statistical methods. It's about measurement, comparison, and hypothesis testing. When we run a t-test to compare two groups, calculate a correlation coefficient, or build a regression model, we're in the quantitative tradition. This approach assumes we can measure phenomena numerically and that statistical patterns reveal important truths about the world. It's powerful for generalization and precise comparison. Qualitative analysis works with text, observations, images, and other non-numerical data. It employs techniques like thematic analysis, content analysis, and grounded theory. When we code interview transcripts, identify patterns in field notes, or interpret visual data, we're doing qualitative analysis. This approach recognizes that not everything meaningful can be reduced to numbers. It excels at capturing context, meaning, and complexity. Mixed methods analysis integrates both approaches, leveraging their complementary strengths. A mixed method study might use surveys to measure the prevalence of a phenomenon, then conduct interviews to understand why it occurs. This integration can happen at different stages, during data collection, analysis, or interpretation. The key is that mixed methods provides triangulation, using different analytical lenses to develop a more complete understanding. These aren't just methodological choices, they reflect different assumptions about knowledge itself. Quantitative approaches typically assume an objective reality that we can measure. Qualitative approaches often emphasize that reality is interpreted and constructed through human experience. Mixed methods pragmatically uses whatever works to answer the research question. Understanding these traditions helps you make informed choices about your own analytical approach and appreciate why different fields favor different methods. The philosophical foundations underlying these approaches are important to understand because they shape everything from research questions to analytical interpretations. The positivist tradition, which underlies most quantitative research, assumes that objective reality exists independently of our observations. In this view, the goal of analysis is to discover universal laws and patterns. Positivists value measurement, prediction, and replication. Statistical significance testing, for example, emerges from positivist thinking about probability and evidence. When a medical researcher tests whether a drug reduces blood pressure using a randomized controlled trial and statistical analysis, They're working within a positivist framework. The interpretivist tradition, common in qualitative research, views reality as socially constructed. Here, meaning emerges through human interpretation and social interaction. Interpretivists don't seek universal laws, but rather understanding of particular contexts and experiences. Analysis focuses on meaning making, not measurement. When an anthropologist analyzes how different cultures understand mental illness through ethnographic observation and interpretation, they're working within an interpretivist framework. The pragmatist tradition, which often guides mixed methods research, is less concerned with philosophical debates about reality and more focused on what works to solve problems. Pragmatists believe that research should be judged by its usefulness, not its adherence to philosophical principles. They freely combine analytical approaches, if doing so provides better answers. When a public health researcher uses both statistical analysis of disease rates and qualitative analysis of community health beliefs to design an intervention, they're taking a pragmatist approach. These aren't just abstract distinctions, they have real implications. A positivist studying depression might develop a standardized scale and analyze scores statistically. An interpretivist might conduct in-depth interviews about lived experiences of depression, analyzing narratives for meaning. A pragmatist might do both, using statistics to measure prevalence and interviews to understand experience, then integrate findings to inform treatment. Understanding these foundations helps explain why different fields favor different analytical approaches, and why scholars sometimes disagree about what constitutes valid evidence or appropriate analysis. It's not that one approach is right and others wrong. Each has strengths and limitations depending on what you're trying to understand. Different academic disciplines have developed their own analytical traditions that reflect their unique questions, values, and constraints. Understanding these traditions helps you navigate expectations in your field, while also recognizing opportunities for innovation. Natural sciences emphasize experimental design, statistical significance, and replication. Physics, chemistry, and biology rely heavily on controlled experiments, mathematical modeling, and statistical hypothesis testing. Analysis in these fields prioritizes objectivity, precision, and generalizability. A biologist analyzing enzyme activity will use standardized protocols, statistical tests, and expect findings to replicate across laboratories. The gold standard is the controlled experiment with random assignment. Social sciences employ diverse analytical traditions, including survey analysis, ethnography, and case studies. Psychology might emphasize statistical analysis of experimental data, while anthropology favors rich ethnographic description. Sociology uses both quantitative analysis of large-scale surveys and qualitative analysis of social interactions. Political science combines statistical analysis of voting patterns with qualitative case studies of political processes. This diversity reflects the complexity of studying human behavior and social systems. Humanities focus on textual analysis, hermeneutics, and critical theory. Literary scholars analyze texts for meaning. Historians interpret documents in context, and philosophers engage in conceptual analysis. These fields rarely use statistics, but have rigorous traditions of argumentation and interpretation. A historian analyzing primary sources uses different evidence standards than a chemist, but both follow systematic analytical procedures within their traditions. Applied fields like medicine engineering, education, and business blend approaches based on practical needs. Evidence-based practice in medicine combines systematic reviews of quantitative studies with clinical expertise. Program evaluation in education might use both test scores and stakeholder interviews. Business analytics integrates statistical modeling with qualitative market research. These fields are often pragmatic, using whatever analytical approaches provide actionable insights. The key insight is that your field's traditions reflect its questions and values. Physics emphasizes prediction and control, so it uses mathematical analysis. Anthropology values cultural understanding, so it uses interpretive analysis. Medicine needs practical treatment guidance, so it combines multiple forms of evidence. Understanding these traditions helps you work effectively within your field, while recognizing when crossing disciplinary boundaries might offer fresh insights. Let's now walk through the analysis process itself. While specific techniques vary, most analysis follows a 6-stage journey from data to insight. Importantly, this process is iterative, not linear. You'll often cycle back through stages as understanding develops. First comes data preparation and organization. This unsexy but crucial stage involves cleaning data, checking quality, handling missing values, and organizing information for analysis. In quantitative work, this might mean coding variables and checking distributions. In qualitative work, it involves transcribing, organizing documents, and preparing materials for analysis. Studies suggest researchers spend up to 80% of their analysis time on preparation. Second is preliminary exploration. Before diving into formal analysis, we explore our data to understand its characteristics. Quantitative exploration uses descriptive statistics and visualizations to understand distributions and identify outliers. Qualitative exploration involves initial reading and memoing to get familiar with the data. This stage often reveals surprises that shape subsequent analysis. Third is primary analysis, applying your core analytical techniques. This might be running statistical tests, conducting systematic coding, building models, or interpreting patterns. This is where your analytical strategy meets your data. Fourth comes interpretation, making sense of what you found. What do the results mean in context? How do they relate to existing knowledge? What are the limitations? Interpretation transforms the results into insights. Fifth is visualization and representation. How will you communicate your findings? This includes creating charts, graphs, models, or narrative descriptions that effectively convey your insights to others. Finally, and crucially, we connect our analysis back to our research questions. Do our findings answer what we set out to investigate? What new questions emerge? Remember, this process is iterative. Your exploration might reveal data problems, requiring additional preparation. Your primary analysis might suggest new exploratory questions. Your interpretation might indicate needs for additional analysis. Flexibility and iteration lead to robust findings. Let's dive deeper into what actually happens at each stage of the analysis process, because understanding these details will help you plan and execute your own analyses more effectively. During preparation, you're essentially getting your data ready for analysis. This means checking for and handling missing data. Will you exclude cases, impute values, or use methods that handle missingness? You're coding variables, perhaps creating dummy variables or composite scores. You're checking data quality. Are there impossible values, outliers or inconsistencies. In qualitative work, you're organizing documents, creating naming conventions, and preparing files for analysis software. In exploration, you're getting to know your data intimately, calculate descriptive statistics, means, medians, ranges, frequencies, create initial visualizations to see patterns. In qualitative work, read through materials, make initial notes, identify potential themes. This stage often generates surprises, unexpected patterns, problems with assumptions, or serendipitous discoveries that redirect analysis. Primary analysis employs your chosen techniques systematically. If testing hypotheses, you run appropriate statistical tests. If building models, you follow modeling procedures. If conducting thematic analysis, you code systematically according to your approach. This stage requires balancing flexibility with systematic procedure. Interpretation requires stepping back from technical results to consider meaning. A statistically significant result might not be practically important. A qualitative theme might have different meanings in different contexts. Consider alternative explanations, limitations, and implications. Visualization transforms findings into accessible formats. Choose representations that honestly convey your findings while making them understandable to your audience. A complex statistical model might need multiple visualizations to communicate effectively. Finally, connecting to research questions ensures you haven't lost sight of your original purpose. Sometimes fascinating findings emerge that don't answer your questions. Acknowledge these, but maintain focus on your core inquiry. This connection stage often reveals needs for additional analysis or highlights new questions for future research. Let's talk about what can go wrong in analysis, because recognizing these pitfalls helps you avoid them. Most analytical problems aren't about sophisticated techniques. They're about fundamental errors that could have been prevented with careful planning. In data preparation, the most common error is ignoring missing data. Simply deleting cases with missing values can introduce serious bias. Another common mistake is coding errors, mislabeling categories, inconsistent coding schemes, or errors in data entry that go unnoticed. These preparation errors cascade through analysis, potentially invalidating all findings. During analysis itself, common pitfalls include using the wrong test for your data type, like using parametric tests on non-normal data without justification. P-hacking, running multiple tests until finding significance, is a serious problem that inflates false positive rates. In qualitative analysis, confirmation bias leads researchers to cherry-pick quotes supporting predetermined conclusions while ignoring contradictory evidence. Interpretation errors include overgeneralization, claiming findings apply beyond your sample without justification. Researchers often ignore limitations, presenting tentative findings as definitive conclusions. Confusing correlation with causation remains surprisingly common, even among experienced researchers. In visualization, misleading graphs distort findings through manipulated axes, cherry-picked time periods, or inappropriate chart types. Even unintentionally, poor visualization choices can misrepresent your findings. The best prevention is planning your analysis before collecting data. Develop an analysis plan that specifies how you'll handle missing data, which tests you'll use, and how you'll interpret different possible outcomes. Pre-registration of analysis plans, increasingly common in many fields, helps prevent post hoc decision-making that can bias results. Remember, No amount of sophisticated analysis can overcome fundamental problems in research design or data collection. Think through your analytical approach during the design phase, not after data collection. Selecting appropriate analytical approaches is crucial for research success. Let's explore the key considerations that should guide your choices. First and foremost, what is your research question actually asking? Questions beginning with what or how much suggest descriptive analysis. Is there a difference? Points toward comparative analysis. What is the relationship? Indicates correlational or relational analysis. What causes? Requires designs and analyses capable of supporting causal inference. What does it mean suggests interpretive analysis? Second, what type of data do you have or plan to collect? Numerical data opens quantitative options. Text, images, or observations suggest qualitative approaches. Having both enables mixed methods. But also consider measurement level. Nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio data require different analytical techniques. Third, what are your sample characteristics? Large samples enable different analyses than small samples. Representative samples support different inferences than convenient samples. The number of groups, time points, or variables all influence analytical options. Fourth, what does your research design allow? Experimental designs support causal analysis. Cross-sectional designs limit you to associations. Longitudinal designs enable analysis of change. Your design determines what questions your analysis can credibly answer. Fifth, what resources are available? Some analyses require specialized software, technical expertise, or computational resources. Be realistic about what you can accomplish with available resources. Finally, and this is the golden rule, let your research questions drive your methods, not vice versa. Too many researchers have a favorite analytical technique and force their questions to fit. This backwards approach limits what you can discover. Instead, start with what you genuinely want to know, then select analytical approaches that can answer those questions given your constraints. If your preferred analysis can't answer your question, either change your analysis or refine your question. But make that choice consciously and justify it clearly. Here's a practical decision framework for making analytical choices based on your research purpose. Think of this as a starting point for matching your analytical approach to what you're trying to accomplish. If you're exploring a phenomenon, trying to understand what's there before forming specific hypotheses, use descriptive statistics for quantitative data, means, standard deviations, frequencies, and distributions. For qualitative data, use thematic analysis or initial coding. Visualization is crucial for exploration. Create multiple graphs, charts, or concept maps to see patterns. If you're comparing groups or conditions, quantitative options include t-tests for 2 groups, ANOVA for multiple groups, or chi-square for categorical comparisons. Qualitative comparisons use comparative case analysis or constant comparative methods. The key is ensuring comparable data across groups. If you're examining relationships between variables or concepts, correlation and regression work for quantitative data. Start with correlation to understand associations, then use regression to model relationships. For qualitative data, pattern analysis identifies how themes relate to each other or to participant characteristics. If you're trying to predict outcomes, regression models remain workhorses for prediction with traditional data. Machine learning algorithms handle complex patterns in large datasets. time series analysis predicts temporal patterns. Qualitative prediction is rare but possible through careful pattern identification and theoretical development. If you're seeking to understand meaning, experiences, or processes, phenomenology explores lived experiences. Grounded theory develops explanatory theories from data, and ethnography understands cultural patterns. These approaches require different analytical techniques. Phenomenology uses thematic analysis focused on experience. Grounded theory uses systematic coding procedures. Ethnography uses cultural interpretation. Remember, these aren't mutually exclusive. A single study might explore through descriptive analysis, compare groups, examine relationships, and develop understanding. The key is being intentional about which analytical tools serve which purposes in your research. Now let's take a moment for self-reflection. I want you to consider 3 questions that connect today's content to your own research journey. First, what analytical approaches are most common in your field, and why are they well suited to your discipline? Think about the dominant methods in recent publications in your area. What makes these approaches particularly useful for the questions your field addresses? Second, how might your research questions shape your analytical approach? Consider a research question you're currently working with or planning to investigate. What analytical approaches would best serve that question? Third, what challenges do you anticipate in analyzing data in your research area? These might be technical challenges, resource constraints, or conceptual difficulties. Take a moment to jot down your initial thoughts. These reflections will be valuable as you begin planning your own research. Consider discussing these questions with colleagues or mentors who can offer additional perspectives on analytical choices in your field. As we conclude, let's crystallize the key takeaways from today's lesson. First, remember that analysis transforms raw data into understanding, is the bridge between observation and insight. Second, different analytical traditions serve different purposes, and understanding these traditions helps you make informed choices. Third, the analysis process is systematic but iterative. Expect to cycle through stages as understanding develops. Fourth, your research questions should drive method selection, not the reverse. Fifth, while your field has dominant analytical traditions, you're not locked into them. Choose approaches that best answer your questions. Finally, planning your analysis early prevents problems that no amount of sophisticated technique can fix later. In our next lesson, we'll dive into specific descriptive statistics and data exploration, so you can apply these lessons in your own research. You now have the conceptual foundation to understand not just how to conduct analysis, but why different approaches exist and when to use them. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our continued exploration of data analysis methods.